Singh's interview of her parents Manmohan Singh and Gursharan Kaur. Gujwant Singh's affidavit are full of the stench of the sufferings of 84. It portrays the life of survivors on a pendulum mode, drifting amidst quest for justice, ritualistic dharnas, petty jobs and no compensation, haunted by the thoughts of safety, issue of othering, conversion of identity, guilt for having survived or not being able to save others, thus examining the reasons of violence. The introduction is dense and introduces us to the ethos of justice delayed and justice denied. For researchers, scholars of the New Age, as well as the urban millennials, cordoned off from the dark age of Punjab history, it supplies rich review of literature on the collective trauma of 84. The whole anthology tries to throw light on the various perspectives, including social, political concerns, historical, ethnographical, archival, and representational aspects of 84 Massacre. It is acknowledgeable and commendable how the editor tries to use the literary space for activism or representation, showing resistance through polyphonic voices, and presents an ensemble of interviews, personal narratives, affidavits filed with the Nanavati Commission, short stories, plays, and poems. The choice of previously published material, its translation, as well as the work on oral literature and affidavits heightens the unconscious violence present within the fiction. Interestingly, it also hints at the politics of memorials, where Gurdwara Shaheed Ganj Sahib in Block B of the Tilak Vihar Widows Colony, a ghetto of the survivors, has a small memorial room, and Gurdwara Rakab Ganj Sahib has 2,500 square foot space as memorial site. The portion of short stories is rich and rife with myriad traumatic slices of experiences of Chaudhry, the wounds of which still remain painfully open. The first short story by Parvinder Mehta, The Fiery Embrace, suggests that suffering is universal and that violence can never exist in isolation. Ironically, it comments how during the communal conflict the roles of the perpetrator and the victim are reversed. In another Hindi story, Mathura Ke Pede, translated by Harish Narayan, the author himself, describes the tragedy of mistaken identity, in which a mob, blind and deaf in hatred, mistakes a Haryanvi man with the surname Singh as a Sikh. Jyoti Verma's story, Eyes Don't Lie, is rife with sensitivity to the experiences of mysterious disappearance of Sikh boys who were perceived as terrorists or were later made to be part of militant Khalistani troop. The short stories are testimony to the fact how violence gets transferred, cannot discriminate, and opens up in the society at large in its various forms and reflects through the actions of the people in power or at an advantage. It reflects how even with a constitution, every state has an internal enemy. The stories reach to an epigrammatic level of no escape from violence with a trace of there is a friend because there is an enemy. And oh my friend, there is no friend. Chaudhry wreaked such a havoc that despite being a spectacle of violence, the repercussions went to the extent of endorsement of Khalistani Punjab, a call for separate homeland for Sikhs, militancy reducing the larger Punjabi Sikh populace to the butt of laughter in form of ensuing Sikh Santa jokes on Sikhs. The two rose sentiment to have a guilty enjoyment out of the unease of the listener. And Freud also in this context says rightly, an economy of pity is one of the most frequent sources of humorous pleasure. It is stunning to note how the tragic comedy Sikh Kebab in the play section by Kurjeet Singh, translated by Ishmeet herself, delves in the issue of transformation of Sikh identity. It echoes a popular joke, what is a Sikh Kebab? The answer to which is a burnt Sikh. Oh. The humor evoked on the behest of a minority community was sufficient to show the negativity, apathy, and emotional restraint. Later, these very jokes became the part of casual humor among Sikhs themselves as a matter of disassociated participation in the existing dark humor or neurosis, where they construct their identity in a less fearful way to face their current disadvantage at hand. Thus, this dark humor emerged as numbing catharsis in inappropriate situations as an aftermath of the massacre, beyond anybody's control, lacking the emotion of love or concern for the victimized. The revolutionary Punjabi street play The Old Man Speaks by Gurcharan Singh, translated by Tajinder Kaur, uses the character of Baba as Shakespearean wise fool, critiquing the situation in Punjab, and he says, "In 1947 I lost my father. In 1984 I lost my son-in-law. My mother became a widow in 1947 and my daughter became widow in 1984. In 1947 a son was orphaned, today a grandson has been orphaned. What a coincidence. Then a grandfather was ruling, today a grandson is ruling. Now don't say Baba makes up stories. Baba only narrates what he has suffered." One can notice how the life and death of a nation is built on the idea of violence. The birth of the nation was out of partisan violence, followed by the end of violence through an assassination, which further ensues anarchic freedom. Further in the play, retorting the Jathedar over the unity of Sikhs, Baba comments caustically, "The Gurus mandated us to stand firm against the oppression and fight for our just rights. We need to follow that order. But tell me, what rights your wealthy Sikhs are going to fight for? They are the ones who rob others of their rights. What do they have common with ordinary Sikhs or other ordinary folks? You should know that the government under which the Sikhs suffered a Holocaust is headed by a Sikh. The city in which all this happened was a Sikh as its mayor. Now go ahead and say that they are out of Panth." The play section is versatile and experimental in its nature and builds the complexity and tension of the representation of 84. Unveiling of multiple wounds narrated in after the unveiling of multiple wounds narrated in the stories. Coming to the section of poetry, so it sets the trauma into Lokpuri poems by Ajmer Lode. And I quote from the pond in my soul and bones in her hand, "When will you clean up my soul of the Tarlokpuri pond, with its dead, sunk, suspended afloat? With the bones in her hand, she's been wandering in search of a clean river where she could dip the bones, let go, free her hands." The muteness of the state apparatus's emptiness in the reportage of the incident and the slip of language is well covered in the Uriya poem October-November of 1984 by Vishnu Mohapatra, translated by Gareshwar Mishra and Jitendra Kumar Nayak. What can one write of today? What can the idiom of files capture? Eyes swollen from crying, a widow's grief staring out of the eyes of a woman whose husband is still alive. The oppressed hearts of orphans defeated the time. All this slips through the net of empty words. All that remains includes one hushed voice and a few government and non-government reports. Pashupati Jha in A Riot Victim brings out the post-traumatic stress disorder laden with madness, fear and lack of faith. And then again, in the name of God, they did something much more terrible. Unmindful of my welling tears, they mutilated in minutes all the gifts I had preserved for years. Since then, however I tried, I failed to utter the name of God. How sad, they leer at me and call me mad. Harmit Kaur's The Portrait of a Man weaves the narrative of the aesthetics and pride of turpentine juxtaposed with helpless choice of pruning one's hair caught between faith and massacre in the wake of the unjustified executions. She writes, "My father's silhouette is incomplete without the shadow of his turban. One, I've seen him tie every day. Once, twice, with careful measured grace, filtering through his movements. But sometimes when I see him, all I can think of is the people who sobbed as they held scissors to the most prominent expression of themselves. I wonder if they look at their reflections and see the faintest silhouettes of what they were forced to give up and give in, and I imagine that the history that is signifies isn't a wound that heals or forgives." Parvinder Mehta's pattern poetry, Aphasia, in the image of thunder lightning, brings out the damaging effect of the shock of the event loaded with fragmentary phrases. It goes like, "Furries unleashed, no rhyme or reason, tearing clothes, snatching dupattas, disgusting honor, unbirthing life, strangling shock, clipping beards,
Gull-ending tires, splashing kerosene, rising fire, exhibiting death.